And so I've been on a warpath, as you know. I'm a lot older than you are, but I'm more on your side of this whole thing. You got to get back to real money. And Bitcoin, when it came out, it took me a while to figure it out. Like I bought it at 6,000, and I'm still saying, why didn't you buy more, asshole?
My guest today is Robert Kiyosaki. This is the man who changed how millions of people think about money. I was about to say Bitcoin there. Think about money. Rich Dad Poor Dad was honestly life-changing for me. And it wasn't just a book. It was more a mindset shift looking at money. And decades later, your core message still holds. If you want to be free, you need to be financially literate. Welcome to the show, Robert Kiyosaki. How are you doing?
Well, Jordan Walker, I'm honored to be part of the younger generation now with the Bitcoin Collective and all this. And we have a lot in common, although I didn't get started into Bitcoin until later. But if you read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, it's really about Bitcoin, because in there I wrote three things: that rich don't work for money because this stuff is fake. This is fake money. And the rich don't save fake money, and your house is not an asset. So a lot of people think I'm a real estate guy. So no, I'm just kind of a hard money guy. And so when I saw Bitcoin came out, it took me, being an old guy, took me a while to catch on to it, So I watched it. It went from like 0 to 20K. Then it retraced down to 1. And I said, it's going to disappear. The damn thing didn't disappear. And so I picked it up at 6,000. And as every Bitcoiner says, I should have bought more.
Everyone says that they should have bought more, but the reality is in 5 or 10 years time, we could be saying, and we likely will be saying the same for these prices of Bitcoin. But honestly, it's an absolute honor to have you on the show. And we're going to take it back a little bit. So we're going to talk more about money, the mindset, then we're going to get on to Bitcoin. Okay. So you've been teaching people about money for so long now, and your message is arguably more relevant today than ever.
Thank you.
Why do you think Rich Dad Poor Dad has stood the test of time?
Well, I've written a whole bunch of books, some with our President Trump, where people hate him, but he's a good man, He's very pro-Bitcoin, as you know. His whole family,
indeed.
But I got into this stuff because there's this book here. It's called The Creature from Jekyll Island. And you can tell I study a lot, And this is a criminal organization. The Federal Reserve Bank, the Bank of England, the Bank of Japan, they're criminal organizations. They're Marxists. And they cause people to get poorer. So every time you print money, you print this fake stuff here. Guys like me get richer, but the poor and middle class get poorer. And so that's why this Creature from Jekyll Island about the Federal Reserve Bank and the Bank of England and Aussie Bank and all this stuff, they're criminals. They're Marxists. And so I'm very much on what you're doing, Jordan. And we have to educate people because this is toilet paper.
It is indeed. And when you break it down, like you break it down brilliantly in the book, because I read Rich Dad Poor Dad a long time ago. And then as a kid, almost, I want to say when I was about 12, 13, 14 maybe. And then I reread it last week. And you're right. Me being like into Bitcoin now, it resonates so much more. But what you're saying in the book is actually so simple. It is looking at the mindset but it's brilliantly put. But when you break it down, you've got assets and you've got liabilities.
Right.
Why do you think that such a simple concept, why do you think that's so hard to understand for so many people? Because people work for that cash that you've got there on the table, but you and I know we wouldn't work for that.
Well, number one is back in 1965, I picked up this thing here. It's a Kennedy $50, and back in
Yeah.
65, this was pure silver. And then a year, was 64, then 65, he turned it to its side. It was copper. And so I'm a kid, I'm 17, 18 years old. And that was Gresham's law. And Gresham's law says when bad money enters the system, good money goes into hiding. So I naturally started to save the real silver coins. And this is what I finally figured out, Jordan, is that I saved all these silver coins. My mother's going, "What are you doing?" I'd go to the bank and I'd take in this toilet paper and I would trade it in for, dimes, quarters, $50, and I'd go through it. And anything that had copper, I threw it out, because I was following Gresham's law. So I had this big bag of silver, pure silver. And I was going, yay. And I came home one day. I went to school in New York, from Hawaii to New York. And I came home and I asked my mom, I said, "What happened to my silver?" She goes, "Oh, I spent it." And Jordan, that was the first, I got it. Poor people are poor because they have no idea what real money is. And so our academic system, my poor dad professors, they indoctrinate and they train kids, young people, even today, to work for fake money. Go to school, get a job, work hard, save money, and invest in a 401k full of garbage. And so I've been on a warpath, as you know. I'm a lot older than you are, but I'm more on your side of this whole thing. Is you got to get back to real money. And Bitcoin, when it came out, it took me a while to figure it out. Like I bought it at 6,000, and I'm still saying, "Why didn't you buy more, asshole?" But today, I don't have that many. I have about 60 Bitcoin, holds. And I tell everybody, just start with a Satoshi. Just start. But get out of this stuff here. But people don't know the difference between this, and Bitcoin. They don't know real money from fake money. That's why there's so many poor people in the world today. And they're most of them academics, they're professors. So
Unfortunately, that's true, and a lot of people I know still are in that rat race that you talk about, and just working for that money, for cash, because
for fake
cash was king, or that's what cash was king, I should say.
Yeah.
That was a common thing for me growing up anyway. I was told that cash was king. I was given a piggy bank, and you would then save your pounds in that. But soon you realize that cash is actually devaluing it over time. And that's the importance of hard money, as you're talking about.
Yeah. Real money, not fake money.
Exactly.
And our academic system, full of these professors, like my poor dad, PhDs, they're brainwashing young people to work for fake money. And I think that, that's criminal. It's actually criminal. I get into a lot of trouble, as you can tell. I'm not on the teacher circuit anywhere in the world. I got Arizona State University kicked me off the campus because I called the teachers a bunch of Marxists for teaching, fake money. The central banks are fake. Central banks are Marxist. By definition, anything central controlled is communists. And so that's what I found out. And so our academic system, you go to school to get a job, to work hard and save money. Are you nuts? Are you freaking nuts? But that's what school teachers are teaching you.
And The wild thing is, so I give a talk multiple times now at different conferences called Crazy is a Numbers Game. And it's all about you are deemed being to be crazy because you don't have the numbers behind you. And unfortunately, at the moment, the numbers are behind this fiat system. And those outside of that are deemed crazy, is how I labeled myself, being a Bitcoiner. But I would say now there is more people getting behind Bitcoin and realizing that there is a problem with the current system that we are living in.
Amen.
So you've said many times, I just want to touch on this because this resonated with me when I was a kid and it stuck with me. And you said it's not how much you make, it's how much you keep.
Right.
And honestly, I can't like emphasize how much that stuck out. So why is how much you keep more important than how much you make in your view?
Well, it's a lot more. The thing I love about Bitcoin, it's hard to steal. The US dollar or the yen or the English pound, it was all designed to steal your wealth. So you work hard for this, and then they steal your wealth out of it via devaluation of it. They just keep printing more and more of this. And I said it earlier, I said, the more you print of this, the richer I get because it makes true assets go up in price, inflation. But it also makes food, dairy, eggs, housing more expensive for the average person. So printing this makes me richer. But unfortunately, for the average Joe Blow, makes him poorer. So it's really a tragedy that our academics have gone Marxists. And that was my poor dad. He's a good man. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with being a Marxist. I support free choice. You can be a communist, like you can be Hindu, you can be Jewish, you can be Buddhist, you can be Christian. Knock yourself out. But you better know you're a Marxist when you support a central bank. As simple as that. And when you say to a child, go to school and get a job, work hard, save money, and invest in the stock market and save this garbage here, you're destroying their future. It's the most criminal thing I've ever seen. So that's why I wrote this book here, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And of course, all those Marxists turned it down. The academics hate me. And that feeling is mutual.
How was the book? Because you are is the book the best selling personal finance book ever? And which is incredible. And whenever I told anyone that I was like, Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad, Poor Dad is coming on the show, everyone was like, yes, I know who that is. I've read the book. When you first published the book, what was it like actually speaking out and publishing the book at that time?
Well, the thing that just drove people nuts was savers were losers. I said the rich don't work for money because it's this stuff here. They don't save it, and your house is not an asset. And I was just going after what's called financial literacy, definitions. That's all it is. And if you call your house an asset when it's a liability, you're in trouble. And that's why so many people are in trouble today. Like, many sports stars, let's say you play soccer, you're a sports star and all this stuff. You make $1 billion. First thing you do is you buy a big house. Do you know what I mean? They go, oh, now I'm a rich person. But you're getting poorer. I'm not against owning a house. I own a lot of houses and all that stuff. But they put money in my pocket. So I own 1,500 rental properties. And with that rental property, then I buy oil, I buy gold, silver, Bitcoin, Ethereum now. So I don't like to have people steal my money. I'm not that stupid. I did really poorly in school. I flunked out of school because I can't write. Ironically, I'm a best-selling author, of course. But my poor dad was an academic genius, but he was poor. He worked hard for this garbage.
It's funny because I was never one for school either. And then I ended up building my own business off the back of not doing that. And it's funny to see how that trend is the same for a lot of founders and CEOs. But you touched on here, and I know you touch on it in the book as well, but you said that your house is not an asset. For anyone listening, there might be people thinking, oh, I thought my house was an asset. Why? Can you just quickly explain why your house isn't an asset?
Well, behind me is this board game called Cash Flow, and I recommend people play it because what Maria Montessori said, what the hand does, the mind remembers. And the most boring subject in business school was accounting. So Cash Flow or Rich Dad, Poor Dad here, they're only books about accounting. Income statement, balance sheet, statement of cash flow. I mean, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to know that. The poor and middle class work for income statements. They want, high income job and expenses. The rich work for balance sheets. So the rich guys are talking balance sheets. Poor people are talking about, I make so much money and I'm trying to save this much money. They're a bunch of losers. But they're poor people because they don't listen to an income statement and a balance sheet and a statement of cash flow. And that's what the game teaches. That's what this book teaches and all this. It's not hard. I mean, not hard at all. So what people do is they call their house an asset when every month taxes, all that stuff is coming out of it. Where I own 1,500 rental properties and 1,500, properties send me money every month. It's not much. It's about $200,000 a month in income. I'm not like Donald Trump, but 200,000 is more than most people make a year. But I just keep adding assets. But what happens to a poor person, because they come from a small house, they go and buy a big house and they get deeper in debt. So it's because they don't know the definition. It's called literacy. And the thing that you got going for you, Jordan, is you're Scots. And I go to Scotland. I played rugby up there, rugby union, and
Amazing.
and all that stuff. And I love your Scotch, but it's not an asset. It's a drug. The Scotch is well, if you're selling it to, yes, but if you're drinking it, so I'm not saying don't do anything. I'm just saying know an asset from a liability. And I love fine Scotch. I don't know how you guys. You got some bottles up there, $800 and stuff like this, but it's worth it. It's worth it. So the Scots are naturally smart with drinking and money.
Yeah.
And rugby. You guys are very good at rugby. Holy well.
Yeah, it's funny because whenever that's kind of how I run my business as well, is because I'm Scottish, it helps. Because I'm notoriously tight is what everyone calls me, and it's I'm just frugal with my money, and I know the value of things, and it's just funny that the Scots have been labeled that we are good with money and we're fairly tight, and we won't let anyone if it's not worth it, we won't give you the money for it.
Very, very refined, like Jews, Chinese, and Scots. It seems to be part of the DNA. You're just good with money. The Bank of Japan is in serious trouble financially. And so is England, serious trouble financially. Germany's in serious trouble, But the Scots will always, at least if they're not doing well, they can drink well.
Yeah. We can do that in Kaylee dance. So, do you think it then, so just sticking on that thread, do you think it then runs in the family and it's generational literacy almost? Because it's very interesting because, just a personal story. I told my mum that you were coming on the show. She had never read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, but last week she read it. She's 70. And she said it's very challenging because it is challenging her view and her mindset of money.
Yeah.
And she's really enjoying
Good.
seeing the world the way that I see it,
Yes.
which is amazing. And do you think that the financial literacy is passed down through generations? And I guess that's the premise of the book of you've got the rich dad understanding it, and then you've got the poor dad not understanding it.
Yeah, I do think it's also, it's a lot harder than that. But like I said, I started saving, these real silver, and then my mother spent it, and she could understand, that this today is worth $10. It's 50 cents here, but today, let's say this is a $10 bill. So Jordan, 10 years from now, what will that be worth? And what will this be worth? Do you know what I mean? And that's why people are poor. They don't understand the intrinsic value of their money. So you look at this here, I took this is gold from my gold mine.
Oh wow,
I took it public on New York Stock Exchange. So I
that's
own
cool.
tons of gold and silver and Bitcoin, but I don't like getting, effed. You know what I mean? So that's why I have tremendous respect for money. Poor people don't. They just think it's money.
Yeah. So moving on to the Bitcoin side of things, like so there's a quote that Jeff Booth, a good friend of mine, and I know you've had him on your
Oh, man.
show as well.
Jeff Booth and Lawrence Lepard, man, those guys are studs, man. Oh man, they smart dudes. So,
They've argued they taught me a lot around money as well and Bitcoin, because they were some of the first people I had on the podcast.
good.
So they've helped shape my understanding of Bitcoin. But Jeff Booth wrote an article called "The Greatest Game," and at the start he put a quote from Buckminster Fuller, and
Yeah.
it was, "You never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete." I blew this at our conference in Scotland, which is the UK's first major Bitcoin conference. I blew this up massive, this quote, and put it on one of the pillars. And I was like, this is so important. Do you think that that quote, that's what Bitcoin kind of represents today?
Bitcoin, I'm a student of Buckminster Fuller also. It's amazing how many people that man affected. He wrote a book called The Grunge of Giants. And it came out posthumously just before he died, as he was dying. And grunge stands for gross universal cash heist. And Fuller was talking about how our wealth is stolen via our money. So a lot of people were affected by Buckminster Fuller. In fact, this afternoon, I'm looking at starting a podcast on Bucky Fuller. And his stuff is hard to understand because he wrote about a thing called generalized principles of universe. And it was, how does God operate the universe? And our job is to operate with the same integrity. So when I understood Bitcoin, Bitcoin's word is integrity. Really what it is an accounting system, blockchain. Do you know what I mean? And so read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, this book here, it's all about accounting. It's the integrity of accounting. In other words, $1 is $1. You don't say it's $10, but that's what they're doing with fake money. They print this stuff like it's going out of style. And there's no integrity in that. And so that's why I say the creature from Jekyll Island about the Federal Reserve Bank, they're Marxist. If you read the book Communist Manifesto, they believe in taxation. That what Stalin said was that taxation is essential for the spread of communism. Now, when the Fed was created, this thing here, the creature, they had to also start taxation. And most Americans are so freaking stupid. They don't study the history. In 1773, America was founded as a tax-free nation. It was the Boston Tea Party. We went against Mother England, so you can't tax us anymore. But then the academics bring in Marxist ideas again, because most school teachers are good people. You can be a communist and still be a good person. But they believe in taxation. I don't pay taxes. I refuse to. And you can do it legally. You don't have to be a crook, but you have to be smart. And that's why this is my friend here, Donald. While we want you to be rich, we don't pay taxes. We're capitalists. We're not Marxists. So if you're paying taxes, you're a Marxist. Simple.
and that's why the lower and middle class feel it so much, right? Because they don't understand this money, the money that they are working so hard for and giving their time up for, to just continue staying on the hamster wheel. And all it takes is a little bit of looking back in history. You're right. It's just looking back at human nature, what we've done before. The book that got me into Bitcoin was not a Bitcoin book at all. It was a book called The Fourth Turning. Yeah. And it got me in because it helped me zoom out and look at what happens over history. And have we been in this situation before? And it then made me think, okay, well, this fourth turning idea actually does align with where we kind of are right now, because we are going through a period of destruction.
It is. And that's why our money, our wealth is being stolen via our money. So every time the Fed prints this stuff here, let me say it again, I get richer. The reason is because I have real assets. When you print this, the price of oil goes up. So I own oil wells. I don't own oil stocks. I own oil wells. When you print this, the price of gold goes up. When you print this, chicken and eggs go up. And so the rich get richer and the poor and middle class get hungrier. They say, how can I survive? Well, they're working for fake money. They're working for this stuff because they went to school and they're doing as they're told. They got a job. They're saving money, getting crucified. It's tragic. So that's why I wrote Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I'm glad your mom read the book, so tell her thank you.
I will do. I'm sure she'll listen to this episode.
You know the famous quote by Milton Friedman, inflation is just like alcoholism. In both cases, the good effects come first, and the bad effects only come later. Well, with Brullo, the good effects are all front-loaded, with no bad effects, because their beers are alcohol-free. And they do taste like the real thing. And even better is you can pay in Bitcoin for them, because they are the world's first Bitcoin treasury brewery, and they have been hailed as the Rolls Royce of alcohol-free beer. So they have given us a 30% off your first order, and the code is BTC30. So if you fancy the taste of beer without the hangover, I would really recommend going and checking them out. We've just had the founder, James, on the podcast. So please go and check that out as well. But do it after the Kiyosaki episode. Let's get back to it. Thank you, guys.
So going on to your journey, because you said you picked up Bitcoin when it was around $6,000.
Yeah.
How did you first come across it? Like, I want to dig in a little bit into your journey into learning about Bitcoin, because a lot of people commonly refer to it as an ego test, because it forces an individual to change their perception on the financial world. Maybe not so much yourself, but yeah, where did you first come across it? And then what was that like aha moment that, this is hard money?
Well, let me show you this again. This is from my gold mine. I own tons of gold. So to jump from gold, which is a tangible asset, to Bitcoin wasn't that hard. And then when I understood it, see, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and this board game behind me are games on accounting. Bitcoin is about accounting. It's the blockchain. And if the accounting system is bad, we're all screwed. So to me, it's a really simple thing. You better put integrity back into your systems. But our academics, the school teachers, I can't believe how criminal they are. They're frickin' Marxists because they support taxation. They support labor unions. They say, workers of the world unite. My poor dad was head of the teachers union. And I'm going, wow. I'm not saying they're bad people. That's like, my friends who are Jewish believe in that, and guys who are Buddhists believe in that, and Christians believe in this. Fine. I don't really care. I believe what I want to believe. But what I understood, Bitcoin had integrity to it. That's the most important word in the universe, is integrity. Does it hold its shape? That was from Buckminster Fuller. Integrity means it holds its shape. So you look at the pyramids of Egypt, they don't fall down because they have integrity. But you build a square building, the building falls down because squares do not exist. You have a square, it goes like this, but a triangle holds its shape. So that's what I was telling at Fuller. I'm going, what the hell is this guy talking about? But when I understood that Bitcoin had integrity, it'll hold its shape. You can't print anymore after 21 million. It'll hold its shape. It's people's money. Gold and silver are God's money. It was put here by God. But this here is fake money. And our schools are academic. Those communists are teaching kids to work for this. They should be shut it down.
And I do believe that we're going in the direction of shutting that down because more people are realizing what Bitcoin is. Like I've been banging this drum for a long time. And I've never felt that so many people are now realizing what Bitcoin actually is. And it's that sly roundabout way of, I think it was Frederick Hayek that said that. And yeah, just going back to your understanding, how did you find, because this is something I talked to Larry about quite a lot, because he's very into gold as well, and he was before Bitcoin. Was it hard for you looking at a hard asset that is digital compared to gold, which is physical, the technical aspect of it? Because that's the barrier for a lot of people from gold to Bitcoin.
I already knew this was fake. If you read all my books, fake money, fake this. I've been against this stuff forever, So that was already there. I just didn't know what was going to replace it. But I knew something was going to come because according to Buckminster Fuller, again, Bucky Fuller did the geodesic domes, and he was considered the grandfather of our future. He's a futurist. And when I was reading Bucky Fuller, he said there's this new currency coming out. Was Bitcoin. He was a futurist. He didn't call it Bitcoin. He says there's this new currency out, and it's going to be electronic. And the reason Fuller knew this was he was watching video games, and he saw them keeping score instantaneously on the video game. So I'm reading Bucky Fuller, and I'm going, ooh. He says, stay on the lookout for it. And when Bitcoin popped up, I didn't know what it was. I'm an old guy. But then I understood that there it is. That's what he said would happen, Bitcoin. The other thing that Bucky Fuller talked about was AI, artificial intelligence. So you look at what's affecting, especially your generation, your kids' generation. I've already made my money. But AI is going to replace people. Do you know what I mean? You don't need a job. Where you can get a job today. So when I started studying AI, artificial intelligence, I said, what's a college degree? That's what that is. But I studied AI. What's its flaw? What's the flaw? AI sucks power. It sucks a lot of power out. So all I did, because I'm a capitalist, not a Marxist like my poor dad, because I knew AI was going to suck more power out, I'm already an oil guy. Do you know what I mean? Oil is power, energy. So I'm forming a natural gas company. So we're going to form the natural gas company, also uranium for nuclear to fund AI. So if you understand what Fuller was saying, that you can see the future if you pay attention. But most people aren't paying attention. They're hustling this thing here. They're saving this thing, and they're going to the store and they can't afford chicken and eggs. So what's happening? They just don't know real money from fake money.
So true, and people can't see into the future. I think that's a big problem. And like, I'm writing a book currently. I'm about 70% of the way through, and it's called Into the Unknown, and it's exactly about what you're talking about. The struggle that people have looking into the future, because if you ask someone in 2009, around iPhones, would you be able to pay for your groceries by just looking at your phone? They would just laugh at you. And now look at us. It's so people just can't look into the future. And one other book that I just want to bring up was The Sovereign Individual. That also refers to Bitcoin as well. In that, which was written in, I think, 1997.
Yeah, great book.
Off the top of my head, yeah. But anyway, sorry, bring it back. So in Rich Dad Poor Dad, you told the story. This is another thing that stuck with me. I'm sorry, there's a lot of things that stuck with me. You told the story about the McDonald's founder saying that they are in the real estate business.
Yeah.
And I've based quite a few presentations on this as well, because when MicroStrategy, or now Strategy, started accumulating Bitcoin, I related that to McDonald's, because what McDonald's were doing was buying up land, buying up real estate, and they're in the real estate game rather than the hamburger game. And so do you think, like, going forward, this is what we do currently as a business, as a Bitcoin collective, we help founders, businesses adopt a Bitcoin strategy. So looking at how can they put Bitcoin on their balance sheet. Do you think that this will become very popular going forward, having Bitcoin on your balance sheet, just like having real estate on your balance sheet, having land on your balance sheet was popular for McDonald's 50 to 100 years ago? And still to this day, they've still got 45 billion worth on there.
Well, I've adopted the Bitcoin standard too. You know, I mean, I don't save dollars and things. I save Bitcoin, because what happens when you save Bitcoin, the future gets less expensive. But if you save this, the future gets more expensive. So it's kind of hard for a person to understand, wait, how can the future get less expensive? Because they think of inflation, and this is what causes inflation. But if you save Bitcoin or Ethereum or those other, now they got stable coins, which is going to be a whole nother thing. It's going to tear apart the banking system. Stable coins are going to destroy this Fed bank. Oh my God. But anyway, I watch all this stuff going on, and so I'll just stick with Michael Saylor. I'm a Bitcoin standard guy. I save gold, silver, Bitcoin. I don't save this trash here. So I also have real estate, but real estate is debt. And, guys like Dave Ramsey who said, get out of debt. Well, if you understood this here, this is debt. That's why, if you're in the UK, Liz Truss and the guild, the English guild is crashing bonds. But it's because this is fake. The US Treasury, our bonds are crashing. But that's why life gets more expensive for those who work for this, and life gets less expensive if you work for Bitcoin.
Looking at Bitcoin, now we've got Bitcoin, how much of a, how much do you think it will change us going into the future, say 10, 20 years? Because you alluded there to the idea of moving from an inflationary environment to a deflationary environment. What Jeff Booth talks about a lot in his book. Do you see a world where we actually move to that, where the price of everything, because this is hard for people to get their head around, where the price of things will actually be coming down because we are living with hard money again?
Well, that's exactly, if you study our Buckminster Fuller, like a geodesic dome guy and all this stuff, he says that, and that's why Jeff Booth, I call Jeff Booth the new Bucky Fuller, because prices should be coming down. But when you print this stuff, prices go up. It makes life harder on people. So I get into a lot of fights with, I have this doctor, it's a woman, and she's always raising her prices. I said, you make life harder on people. Yeah, but I got to make my money. I got to make my money. You know, your job is how do you make life less expensive? That's capitalism. So I created this cash flow board game because people could teach people about money. Or you can go to college, and that communist Obama, he put the student loan debt in there. So today kids are now leaving school with billions, not billions, millions of dollars of student loan debt. So Obama, Biden, Kamala, I'm not Republican or Democrat, but you look at what they did, that criminal Obama made life expensive. A capitalist is supposed to make life less expensive. So you look at what, the cell phone, everything came down because of it. That's the difference. But these Marxists, because they want this stuff here, the creature from Jekyll Island, they're making life hard. They should be teaching kids, your job is to make life less expensive so people can live better. Oh, no, I want my pay raise. I belong to a labor union. School teachers, Marxists.
Do you think it's because they live in I guess it's because they live in a Marxist system, and that's the financial literacy that's the financial education that they've had, and it gets passed down, right? So then they're then teaching that on and working within that system, and that's how it keeps going. And now we're seeing more people leave that system. I'm certainly seeing more people leave that system when you look at it as fiat, and then if you look at it as Bitcoin. And I'm starting to see more people realize that, okay, this is not right. We shouldn't be having to just continually ask for a wage rise. The price of bread and eggs and everything should not be going up this amount. And it almost feels like now more people are realizing this. How do you think that ends? If relating that to the fourth turning, how do you think we then get to the first turning again? Because notoriously it's been a war, and I don't want to say that's what's coming. But how do you think that we actually go from bad money to good money?
Well, you did say the word. I think we're going to go to war, civil war. And unfortunately, that's why my friend here, Donald Trump, and all this stuff, our job is to make life easier, less expensive. If you can get that through your head, then you'll understand why this is a criminal operation. Your job as an entrepreneur is to make life easier and better, not more expensive. But because of this, the Federal Reserve Bank, the Bank of England, Bank of Japan, and all this stuff, the ECB, European Central Bank, they're criminal. They're Marxists. They're Marxist. And that's why all school teachers are Marxists. They like it. They belong to labor unions. My poor dad belonged to a labor union. You want to belong to a labor union? It's a free country. I'm not here to argue with that. All I'm saying is that my job as a capitalist is to make life less expensive and better. That's my job. And, like when I was talking about Isla and Life for Rick and all the your scotches, you make life a lot better because you produce such, no, it's great product. Do you know what I mean? Look
It
at what
is great.
McDonald's made all these hamburgers for everybody less expensive. And they bought real estate. They got rich. But our school teaches us the opposite. Go to school, work for toilet paper, save money, pay taxes, get out of debt, and invest in the stock market. You're being brainwashed. You're being brainwashed by the banks, by these guys here.
That's where it comes back to, is the banks. Like, it's not necessarily the people's fault, because it all comes back to the banks and the money that we are using, because if the money's manipulated, everyone else is manipulated to live in that system, unfortunately. So yeah, just to round things off, that you've done the work to understand what Bitcoin is, and you've put in that work to educate yourself around Bitcoin, and a lot of the listeners have also done the same. What would you, if you were to give any advice to anyone that still thinks Bitcoin is a scam, which there are plenty of those people out there, what would you say to them?
Well, this scams at everything. Wake up. This is the biggest scam of all. What's the big deal? Do you know what I mean? Like I meet people who steal. Oh my God. Does people actually steal? And that doctor friend of mine, she keeps raising her prices. I'm going, but you're making life harder. But I gotta make more money. But you just remember that as a capitalist, it's supposed to make life easier, better, less expensive. So if you pay a lot of money for my board game, but ultimately life gets less expensive because you get smarter. When you work for Bitcoin, life gets less expensive. But if you work for this here, life gets more expensive. It's really quite simple. I don't know what's so hard about that. But because you're brainwashed to go to school, get a job, work hard, save money. My poor dad. And it's really sad. There's this book here, Money and GPT here. Yeah, it's simple. Life, your job, Jordan, your job, my job is make life easier for people. So anyway, I'm a U.S. Marine pilot. I flew in Vietnam, killed a lot of people out there in the name of freedom. And some things are worth fighting for. And our freedom is worth fighting for. And so all these guys who are printing this garbage here, you're killing people. You look at who they bailed out. They bailed out the rich. When 2008, when this thing crashed, they bailed out the rich. Guess what? They still do that. They bail out the rich. The banking system is criminal. The Bank of England is criminal. ECB, criminal. Oh, no, they're not. They're not. They're legally sanctioned, but they're criminal. They make life harder on people. Jordan, your job, my job, make life better for people. That's our job. Okay.
I love that. And freedom is worth fighting for. That's a brilliant way to end any podcast. Robert, honestly, thank you so much for coming on the show. It means so much to me.
And Jordan, you have a great, I thought your name was Johnny Walker. I said, oh my God, it's even better. But you come from a rich heritage of great people, naturally smart when it comes to money. So congratulations.
Thank you.